A pregnant woman, with nothing but a worn suitcase, arrives at a remote Nebraska ranch, expecting rejection, but finding an unexpected offer from a weathered cowboy. Stay, if you feed the horses. But when her violent past catches up with her, will she discover that her worth was never determined by others' judgment? Will shame drive her away from the one place she's ever truly belonged? The dusty road stretched like a brown ribbon across the Nebraska territory, and Catherine Mayfield's feet hurt something fierce. Her worn boots had holes that let in every pebble, and the heavy suitcase made her arm ache down to her bones. The summer sun of 1867 beat down on her shoulders like a hammer, and sweat dripped into her eyes. She stopped walking and set down her case. Her hand went to her belly, which stuck out round as a watermelon under her faded blue dress. The baby kicked hard, like it was trying to tell her something important. Maybe it was saying what she already knew. They were both in big trouble. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, rubbing the spot where tiny feet pushed against her ribs. "We'll find somewhere safe. We have to." The road split ahead of her. One way led back to town, where people whispered behind their hands and pointed at girls like her. The other way led to a ranch she'd heard about, a place where a man might need help with work. She'd never been to a ranch before, but how hard could it be? Catherine picked up her suitcase and chose the road that led away from the whispers. Her mama always said that when you don't know which way to go, pick the path that scares you less. Right now, a strange ranch scared her a lot less than going back to town. The land here was different from back east. Everything was big and open, like God had stretched out his arms as wide as they could go. Grass waved in the wind like ocean waves, and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. She'd never seen so much space in her whole life. As she walked, she thought about how she'd gotten here. 6 months ago, she'd been working in a factory, making just enough money to pay for a tiny room and bread for supper. Then James had come along with his smooth words and fancy promises. He'd said he loved her. He'd said they'd get married. He'd said a lot of things that turned out to be lies. When she'd told him about the baby, he'd looked at her like she was something nasty he'd stepped in. "That's not my problem," he'd said, and walked away. She'd never seen him again. The factory boss had fired her when her condition became obvious. "Can't have that kind of woman working here," he'd said. "Sets a bad example for the other girls." The landlord had thrown her out a week later. "Decent folks don't want to live near your sort," he'd told her. Now she had nowhere to go and no money left. The baby would come in a few months, and she needed to find work and a place to stay. The ranch ahead was her last hope. She could see buildings now, a house, a barn, some fences. Cattle dotted the fields like brown and black spots. It looked peaceful, but Catherine knew that looks could fool you. James had looked like a gentleman, after all. Her steps got slower as she got closer. What if the rancher was like all the others? What if he took one look at her and told her to get off his land? What if he was mean, or worse? The baby kicked again, harder this time. Catherine stopped and pressed both hands to her belly. "I know you're scared too," she said softly. "But we're going to be brave. We don't have any other choice." She could hear sounds now, horses nickering, chickens clucking, the creak of a windmill turning in the breeze. Normal sounds, good sounds. Maybe this place would be different. As she got closer to the house, she saw a man come out of the barn. He was tall and lean, with dark hair and clothes covered in dust. He hadn't seen her yet, but she could tell he was strong from the way he carried himself. He moved like he belonged here, like this land was part of him. Catherine's heart started beating faster. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. She smoothed down her dress and tried to make herself look respectable, though she knew it was hopeless. Her dress was old and patched. Her hair was coming loose from its pins, and there was no hiding her condition. The man looked up and saw her. He stopped what he was doing and walked toward her. Catherine's mouth went dry. She wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. She wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. "Please," she whispered to herself. "Please let him be kind." The man got closer, and she could see his face now. He had gray eyes and lines around them from squinting in the sun. His face was serious, but not mean. Not yet, anyway. This was the moment. Everything that happened next would depend on the next few words they said to each other. "You lost, miss?" the man asked, stopping a few feet away from her. His voice was deep and calm, like water running over stones. Catherine had expected him to sound angry or suspicious, but he just sounded curious, maybe even a little concerned. "I'm looking for work," she said, lifting her chin up high even though her voice shook. "I can cook and clean and mend clothes. I'm a hard worker." The man looked at her for a long moment. His eyes took in her patched dress, her worn boots, and the obvious bulge of her belly. But he didn't look disgusted or angry like the others had. He just looked thoughtful. "Can you feed horses?" he asked. The question surprised her. She'd expected him to ask about her condition, or where she came from, or why she was alone. Instead, he wanted to know if she could feed horses. Yes, I think so," she said. "I grew up on a small farm. We had 2 horses. I fed them every day before my papa died." The man nodded. "Name's Ezra McKinnon. This is my ranch." He gestured toward the house and barn. "You can stay if you feed the horses. Dawn and dusk, every day." "That's the job." Catherine stared at him. "That's all?" "That's all." She couldn't believe it. No questions about her past. No demands to know who the father was. No speeches about proper behavior or decent women. Just a simple offer of work in exchange for a place to stay. "I don't understand," she said. "You don't know anything about me. I could be a thief or worse." Ezra shrugged. "Could be, but you don't look like a thief. You look like someone who needs help, and I need someone to feed the horses." "But she gestured at her belly, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "You're what? Going to have a baby? So what? Babies need to eat too. Horses don't care about your personal business, and neither do I." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. After weeks of judgment and cruel words, this man's simple acceptance felt like a miracle. "Why?" she whispered. "Why what? Why are you being kind to me?" Ezra was quiet for a moment. He looked out over his land, then back at her. "My mama used to say that everybody deserves a chance. She said judging people is God's job, not ours. Our job is just to help when we can." "Your mama sounds like a wise woman." "She was. Died when I was 15. Fever took her." His voice got quiet. "She would have liked you, I think. She always had a soft spot for strays." "Is that what I am? A stray?" "We're all strays, miss. Some of us just admit it more than others." He picked up her suitcase. "Come on. I'll show you where you can stay." The house was bigger than it looked from the outside. It was clean and comfortable, with simple furniture and colorful rugs on the wooden floors. Ezra led her to a small room at the back. "This was my sister's room," he said. "She got married last year and moved to California. You can use it as long as you need." The room had a bed with a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the fields. After sleeping in barns and abandoned sheds for the past 2 weeks, it looked like a palace. "It's wonderful," Catherine said, setting her suitcase on the bed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've wrestled with Thunder at feeding time. He's got opinions about how his oats should be served." "Thunder?" "My stallion. He's a bit particular. But don't worry, he's all noise and no bite. Molly, on the other hand, is sweet as pie. She's the mare." Catherine nodded, though she felt nervous about meeting these horses. It had been years since she'd been around them, and she'd never dealt with a stallion before. "I'll show you the barn in the morning," Ezra said. "Feeding time is at dawn and dusk. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir." "Just Ezra? And you are?" "Catherine Mayfield." "Well, Catherine Mayfield, welcome to the McKinnon Ranch. I hope you'll be happy here." As he left her alone in the room, Catherine sat on the bed and looked around. For the first time in months, she felt safe. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had a roof over her head and a bed to sleep in. The baby seemed to sense her relief and settled down, the kicking finally stopping. She opened her suitcase and took out her few belongings: 2 dresses, some undergarments, her mother's Bible, and a small wooden horse her father had carved for her when she was little. She set the horse on the dresser and touched it gently. "We made it, Papa," she whispered. We found a place where people don't judge. Outside her window, she could hear the horses moving around in the barn. Tomorrow, she would meet them and start her new job. She didn't know if she'd be good at it, but she was determined to try. This man, Ezra, had given her a chance when no one else would. She wasn't going to let him down. But as she lay down to sleep, one question kept running through her mind. Why had he really helped her? The rooster's crow pierced the morning air like a rusty nail, and Catherine jolted awake in complete darkness. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she remembered where she was, not in some cold barn or under a leaky bridge, but in a real bed with clean sheets, the McKinnon Ranch. Her new home, if she could prove herself worthy of it. She fumbled for the oil lamp beside her bed, her hands shaking from nerves, more than cold. The flame flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the unfamiliar walls. Through the window, she could see the faintest hint of gray creeping across the sky. Dawn was coming, and with it, her first real test. The baby stirred inside her, stretching and pushing against her ribs like it was trying to wake up too. "Morning, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "Today we start our new life. Don't make me look foolish, you hear?" Catherine dressed quickly in her better dress, the brown one with only 2 small patches instead of 5. She braided her hair tight and pinned it up proper, then splashed cold water on her face from the wash basin. In the mirror, she looked pale and scared, but determined. That would have to do. The house was silent as she crept through the hallway. Ezra's room was at the front, and she could hear him breathing deep and steady through the closed door. She wondered what time he usually got up. What if she was too early? What if she was too late? What if she did everything wrong and he changed his mind about letting her stay? The barn door creaked something awful when she opened it, loud enough to wake the dead. Catherine winced and stepped inside, holding her lamp high. The smell hit her first, hay and leather and horses, mixed with something else she couldn't name. It was a good smell, earthy and real. Well, what have we here? Catherine nearly dropped her lamp. A voice had come from the shadows, but it wasn't Ezra's voice. This one was higher, younger, with a teasing note that made her stomach clench. A boy stepped into the light, maybe 16 or 17, with sandy hair and freckles scattered across his nose like someone had flicked a paintbrush at him. He wore work clothes and a cocky grin that reminded her uncomfortably of James. "You must be the new help," he said, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. "I'm Billy Tucker. I work here sometimes, helping with the cattle and such." "I'm Catherine," she said, stepping back. "I'm here to feed the horses." "Are you now?" Billy's grin got wider. "Well, ain't that something? Ezra didn't mention you were so interesting." The way he said it made Catherine's cheeks burn. She'd heard that tone before, from men who thought they knew exactly what kind of woman she was just by looking at her condition. "I should get to work," she said, turning away. "Hold on there." Billy caught her arm, his grip just a little too tight. "No need to be unfriendly. We're going to be working together after all. Might as well get acquainted." Catherine tried to pull away, but his fingers dug into her arm. "Let me go." "Now, don't be like that. I'm just being neighborly." His eyes glittered in the lamplight. "A woman in your condition probably needs all the friends she can get. She's got all the friends she needs." Both Catherine and Billy spun around. Ezra stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour. His face was calm, but something dangerous flickered in his gray eyes. "Morning, Mr. McKinnon," Billy said, dropping Catherine's arm like it was on fire. "I was just introducing myself to the new help." "I can see that." Ezra's voice was soft, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Wasn't expecting to see you this early, Billy, or at all for that matter." Billy's cocky grin faltered. "Well, I was just passing by, and I saw the light in the barn. Thought maybe there was trouble." "No trouble. Catherine's just starting her morning chores." Ezra moved closer, and somehow he seemed to fill up the whole barn with his presence. "I'm sure you've got plenty to do at your own place." "Yes, sir. I surely do." Billy tipped his hat to Catherine, but his eyes held a promise that made her shiver. "See you around, Miss Catherine." After he left, the barn felt 10 times bigger and 100 times safer. Catherine realized she was holding her breath and let it out in a long whoosh. "You all right?" Ezra asked, his voice gentle now. Fine, she lied. Just fine. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded toward the horse stalls. Come on, let me introduce you to the ones that really matter around here. The first stall held the biggest horse Catherine had ever seen. He was black as midnight, with a white star on his forehead, and when he saw them coming, he tossed his head and snorted like a dragon. This is Thunder, Ezra said. He's got more personality than most people I know, and twice as much stubbornness. Thunder stretched his neck over the stall door and sniffed at Catherine's hair. His breath was warm and sweet, and despite her nervousness, she found herself smiling. He's beautiful, she said. He's trouble, Ezra corrected, but his voice was fond. Someone hurt him bad before I got him. Took months to get him to trust me. Now he thinks he owns the place. In the next stall was a smaller horse, brown with a white blaze down her face. She nickered softly when she saw them and pushed her nose against Catherine's palm. And this is Molly, Ezra said. She's the opposite of Thunder, sweet as sugar and twice as smart. She'll be your best friend if you let her. Catherine stroked Molly's soft nose, and something tight in her chest loosened. Hello, girl, she whispered. We're going to be great friends, aren't we? Ezra showed her where the feed was stored, how much each horse got, and the best way to fill their water troughs. It was more complicated than she'd expected, but not impossible. Thunder required his oats mixed with molasses, while Molly preferred hers plain. Both horses needed fresh hay and clean water twice a day. Think you can handle it? Ezra asked. I think so. Catherine measured out Thunder's feed carefully, making sure to get the proportions right. What about Billy? Will he be coming around often? Ezra's jaw tightened. Billy Tucker is the kind of boy who thinks he's a man because he can cause trouble. He won't bother you again. How can you be sure? Because I'll make sure of it. The steel in his voice left no room for argument. This is your home now, Catherine. Nobody has the right to make you feel unsafe here. As she fed the horses, Catherine felt a warm glow spread through her chest. Home. He'd called it her home. When was the last time anyone had said that to her? When was the last time she'd felt like she belonged somewhere? Thunder crunched his oats with obvious satisfaction, and Molly whinnied softly as Catherine filled her water trough. The morning light was getting stronger now, painting the barn walls gold and chasing away the shadows. They like you, Ezra observed, watching her work. How can you tell? Thunder hasn't tried to bite you yet. That's a good sign. He leaned against the stall door, his arms crossed. What made you choose this place? There must be other ranches around. Catherine's hands stilled on the water bucket. How could she explain that she'd had nowhere else to go? That his ranch was her last hope before she ended up sleeping in ditches and begging for scraps? I heard you were a fair man, she said finally. That you judged people by their work, not their circumstances. Who told you that? A woman in town. She said you'd given her son a job when nobody else would hire him because he'd been in trouble with the law. Ezra was quiet for a long moment. Tommy Bradford. He stole some chickens because his little sisters were hungry. Spent a month in jail for it. When he got out, people treated him like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. What happened to him? He worked here for 2 years, saved every penny, and bought his own little place. Last I heard, he was doing well. Got married. Had a baby. Ezra's voice softened. Sometimes people just need a chance to prove themselves. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Is that what you're giving me? A chance? That's what I'm giving both of us. The way he said it made her heart skip. What did he mean by that? But before she could ask, Thunder nudged her shoulder with his big head, demanding attention. He's jealous, Ezra said with a chuckle. Thinks you should be paying attention to him instead of me. Catherine laughed despite herself. Well, he is very handsome. Don't let it go to his head. He's vain enough already. As they walked back to the house together, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could make this work. Maybe she could prove herself worthy of Ezra's kindness. Maybe she could build a life here, a real life, for herself and her baby. But as they reached the porch, she saw Billy Tucker sitting on his horse at the edge of the property, watching them. Even from a distance, she could see the ugly expression on his face. Her hope flickered but didn't die. She had Ezra on her side now, and she had work to do. Whatever Billy Tucker was planning, she would face it when it came. For now, she had horses to feed and a home to protect. 3 weeks later, Catherine's hands had grown tough from handling rope and feed buckets, and her back had stopped aching from the morning and evening chores. She'd fallen into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Up before dawn, tend to Thunder and Molly, help Ezra with breakfast, spend the day mending clothes or tending the vegetable garden, then back to the barn as the sun set. But this morning was different. This morning, she woke to the sound of men's voices outside her window, angry and sharp as broken glass. Catherine pressed her face to the glass and saw 3 riders in the yard. She recognized Billy Tucker right away. He sat his horse like he owned the world, his hat tilted at a cocky angle. The other 2 men were strangers, but they looked cut from the same cloth, young, mean, and looking for trouble. Ezra stood on the porch, his rifle held loose in his hands. Even from a distance, Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders. "You boys are on private property," Ezra said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I suggest you move along." "We're not here to cause trouble, McKinnon," Billy called out. "We're here to talk sense into you." "About what?" "About the kind of woman you're harboring under your roof." Billy's voice turned nasty. "Folks in town are talking. They're saying you've taken up with a fallen woman. A woman who's carrying another man's bastard." Catherine's blood turned to ice. She pressed her hand to her belly, where the baby was kicking hard, as if it could sense her fear. "What folks say is none of my business," Ezra replied. "And it's none of yours either." "See? That's where you're wrong," one of the other men spoke up, a tall, thin fellow with a cruel mouth. "When decent people have to see that kind of shameful behavior, it becomes everybody's business. Martha Henley won't even let her daughters ride past your place anymore," Billy added. "Says she doesn't want them exposed to that kind of influence." Catherine felt her cheeks burn with shame. She'd hoped that living out here on the ranch would keep her away from the gossip and judgment, but it seemed there was no escaping it. Martha Henley is a busybody who's got nothing better to do than stick her nose where it doesn't belong, Ezra said. "And if you boys don't have anything better to do than spread her gossip, then you're no better than she is." The third man, who'd been silent until now, urged his horse forward. He was older than the others, maybe 30, with dead eyes that made Catherine's skin crawl. "You're making a mistake, McKinnon," he said quietly. "People are starting to wonder about you, starting to question your judgment. A man who keeps company with whores might not be the kind of man other folks want to do business with." Ezra's rifle came up slightly. "I'm going to say this once, and then I'm going to start shooting. Get off my land, now." "You can't hide behind that gun forever," Billy said. "People have a right to know what kind of woman they're dealing with." "What kind of woman?" Ezra's voice was dangerously quiet. "You mean the kind who gets up before dawn to tend my horses? The kind who works harder than most men I know? The kind who doesn't judge people by their past mistakes?" Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever defended her like this. No one had ever called her work valuable or praised her character. She wanted to run outside and stand beside him, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. "You can dress it up however you want," the older man said, "but facts are facts. She's a fallen woman carrying a bastard child. That's not the kind of person decent folks want in their community." "Then maybe decent folks aren't as decent as they think they are." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Catherine could see the 3 men exchanging glances, could feel the tension building like storm clouds. "You'll regret this, McKinnon," Billy said finally. "Mark my words." "I'll regret a lot of things in my life," Ezra replied. "But giving a good woman a chance to prove herself won't be one of them." The men turned their horses and rode away, but not before Billy looked directly at Catherine's window. She jerked back from the glass, her heart hammering. When she finally found the courage to go outside, she found Ezra sitting on the porch steps, his rifle across his knees. He looked older somehow, worn down by the confrontation. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For what?" "For bringing this trouble to your door. For making people question your judgment. For—" She gestured helplessly at her belly. Ezra looked up at her, and his eyes were gentle. "Catherine, sit down." She settled beside him on the steps, careful not to sit too close. The morning sun was warm on her face, but she felt cold inside. "Do you know why I really offered you this job?" he asked. "Because you needed someone to feed the horses. I could feed the horses myself. I've been doing it for years." He set the rifle aside and turned to face her. "I offered you the job because I saw something in your eyes that I recognized." "What?" "The look of someone who's been judged unfairly, someone who's been told they're not good enough, not worthy of kindness or respect." His voice got quiet. "I know that look because I've worn it myself." Catherine stared at him. "You? But you're respected. You have your own land, your own business. People look up to you." "Not always." Ezra was quiet for a long moment. "I told you my mama died when I was 15. What I didn't tell you was how she died." Catherine waited, sensing that this was important. She was sick for a long time, needed medicine, needed a doctor. But we were poor, and doctors don't treat poor folks the same way they treat rich ones. His hands clenched into fists. "She died because people decided she wasn't worth saving, because they judged her by her circumstances instead of her character." "I'm sorry," Catherine whispered. "After she died, I was angry. Angry at the world. Angry at God. Angry at anyone who had more than I did. I got into fights, caused trouble, made enemies. People started crossing the street when they saw me coming, started saying I was no good, that I'd never amount to anything. But you did amount to something. You built all this." "I built it to prove them wrong. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every acre of land, it was all to show them that they were wrong about me." He looked out over his property. "But somewhere along the way, I realized something. It doesn't matter what they think. What matters is what I think about myself." Catherine felt something shift inside her chest. "Is that why you helped me? Because you know what it's like to be judged?" "Partly, but also because I could see who you really are. You're not a fallen woman, Catherine. You're a woman who loved someone who didn't deserve it. You're a woman who's working hard to build a better life for herself and her child. You're a woman who treats animals with kindness and gets up before dawn to do her job right. But the baby," she began, "will be loved and cared for. That's what matters. Not who the father is or what mistakes were made in the past." He stood up and held out his hand to her. "Come on. Thunder and Molly are probably wondering where their breakfast is." As they walked to the barn together, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Pride. Not shame, not regret, but actual pride in who she was and what she was doing. Thunder whinnied when he saw them coming, and Molly nickered softly. They were happy to see her, these horses who didn't care about her past or her circumstances. They only cared that she brought them food and water and gentle words. "You know what I think?" Ezra said as she measured out Thunder's oats. "What?" "I think those 3 men are scared." "Scared? Of what?" "Of you. Of what you represent." He leaned against the stall door. "You're proof that people can change, that mistakes don't define a person forever. That threatens people who want to believe that some folks are just naturally better than others." Catherine poured water into Molly's trough, thinking about his words. "Do you really believe that? That people can change?" "I know they can. I did it myself." He smiled at her. "And you're doing it too. Every day, you're proving that you're more than what happened to you in the past." As she finished her chores, Catherine felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since she'd discovered she was carrying a child, she felt like she might actually be worthy of happiness. But as they walked back to the house, she couldn't shake the memory of Billy Tucker's cold eyes and cruel smile. This wasn't over. She could feel it in her bones. The question was, what would he do next? Fire licked at the edges of the barn door, and Catherine's scream cut through the black night like a knife. She stumbled from her room in her nightgown, bare feet slapping against the cold wooden floor as orange light danced across her window. The smell of smoke filled her nose, thick and choking. "Ezra!" she called, but his room was already empty, his boots gone from beside the door. Outside, she could hear him shouting commands to himself, his voice tight with panic. "The horses," Thunder and Molly were trapped inside that burning barn. Catherine grabbed the first coat she could find and ran outside. The heat hit her face like a slap, and sparks flew through the air like angry fireflies. Ezra was already at the water pump, filling buckets as fast as he could work the handle. "Stay back!" he yelled when he saw her. The roof could come down any second. But Catherine wasn't listening. Through the smoke, she could hear Thunder screaming, a sound like nothing she'd ever heard before, full of terror and pain. Molly was whinnying too, high and desperate. They were going to die in there if somebody didn't help them. "We have to get them out," she shouted over the roar of the flames. "The door's blocked. Something's jammed against it from the inside." Ezra threw a bucket of water at the flames, but it was like spitting at a wildfire. "I can't get it open!" Catherine ran to the barn door and pulled at the handle with all her strength. It wouldn't budge. Something heavy was pressed against it from the other side. A feed barrel, maybe, or a pile of hay bales. The horses were trapped, and the fire was getting worse by the minute. "There!" Ezra pointed to a small window high up on the side of the barn. "If I could get up there, I might be able to squeeze through and move whatever's blocking the door." "You're too big," Catherine said, studying the window. It was barely wide enough for a child, let alone a grown man. "But I'm not. Absolutely not. You're pregnant, and that roof could collapse any second. Those horses are going to die." Catherine was already looking for something to climb on. "Help me up, or I'll find another way." Ezra stared at her for a moment, then cursed under his breath. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." He dragged a wooden crate over to the wall. "But you're right. It's the only way." Catherine climbed onto the crate, then onto Ezra's shoulders. The window was still too high. Behind them, more of the barn caught fire, and the horses' cries got more desperate. "Higher!" she called. Ezra boosted her up until she could grab the window frame. The wood was already hot from the fire, and she could barely see through the smoke inside. But she could hear the horses clearly now. They were in the back stalls, probably too scared to move, even if the door was open. "I can see what's blocking the door," she called down. "It's hay bales. 3 or 4 of them. If I can push them aside." "Catherine, no, it's too dangerous." But she was already pulling herself through the window. The drop to the barn floor was farther than she'd expected, and she landed hard, her knees buckling. Pain shot through her back, and the baby kicked in protest. The smoke was so thick she could barely breathe. She pulled her nightgown up over her nose and mouth and crawled toward the door. The hay bales were heavy, but fear gave her strength she didn't know she had. One by one, she shoved them aside. Thunder's stall was empty. The door hung open, but the horse was nowhere to be seen. Had he already escaped somehow? Then she heard a crash from the far corner of the barn, and she knew. He was trapped back there, too scared to run even though his stall was open. The main door finally budged, and Ezra burst through. "Molly first," he shouted, leading the trembling mare toward the door. "She's the easier one." Catherine stumbled toward the back of the barn, following the sound of Thunder's terrified whinnying. She found him in the corner, pressed against the wall with his eyes rolled back white. A burning beam had fallen across his escape route, trapping him. "Easy, boy," she whispered, though her voice was raw from the smoke. "It's me. You know me." Thunder's ears flicked toward her voice, but he didn't move. He was too scared, too confused by the fire and smoke. "We have to move that beam." Ezra appeared beside her, Molly safely outside. "It's too heavy, and it's on fire." "Then we'll have to get him to jump over it." Ezra grabbed a lead rope from a peg on the wall. "Think you can calm him down enough to put this on?" Catherine approached Thunder slowly, her hands out where he could see them. "Remember me, big boy? Remember the molasses in your oats? Remember how I scratch behind your ears just the way you like?" Thunder's breathing slowed slightly. He was still terrified, but he knew her voice. Trust. She needed him to trust her. "That's right," she whispered, slipping the lead rope over his head. "Now we're going to walk out of here together. No running, no panicking. Just nice and easy." But as they approached the burning beam, Thunder balked. He reared up, nearly pulling the rope from Catherine's hands. The fire was too bright, too hot, too scary. "He won't do it," Ezra said. "We need another way." No. Catherine's voice was firm. He trusts me. I know he does. She looked into Thunder's wild eyes. Don't you, boy? You know I'd never let anything hurt you. She started walking toward the beam, not looking back to see if Thunder was following. One step, then another. Behind her, she could hear his hooves on the barn floor, hesitant at first, then more confident. That's it, she whispered. Trust me. Just trust me. When they reached the beam, Catherine didn't hesitate. She stepped over it, pulling gently on the rope. For a heart-stopping moment, Thunder hesitated. Then, with a snort that sounded almost like laughter, he leaped over the burning wood and followed her to safety. Outside, the three of them collapsed in the yard, coughing and gasping in the clean night air. The barn was fully engulfed now, flames reaching toward the stars like grasping fingers. How did it start? Catherine asked when she could finally speak. Ezra's face was grim. It didn't start by accident. Someone set this fire on purpose. Catherine felt ice form in her stomach. Who would do such a thing? Someone who wanted to send a message. Ezra looked at the ruins of his barn, then at her. Someone who thinks scaring us will make us change our minds about you staying here. Billy Tucker, Catherine whispered. Probably, but I can't prove it. Ezra's hands clenched into fists. And even if I could, what then? His father's the sheriff's brother. The law won't touch him. Catherine stared at the burning barn, at the place where Thunder and Molly could have died. All because of her. All because she dared to hope for a better life. I should leave, she said quietly. No. Ezra's voice was firm. That's what they want. They want you to run away so they can feel good about themselves. So they can pretend they're protecting the community from dangerous people. But if I stay, what's next? What if they try to hurt you? Or the horses? Or… She put her hand on her belly, where the baby was kicking frantically. If you leave, they win. They get to decide who's worthy of help and who isn't. Who belongs and who doesn't. Ezra turned to face her fully. Is that the world you want your child to grow up in? Catherine looked at Thunder and Molly, both safe despite everything that had happened. She thought about the past few weeks, about feeling useful and valued for the first time in months, about Ezra defending her to those men in the yard. No, she said finally. It's not. Then we fight back. We show them that fear won't work, that good people don't run away when bullies try to scare them. But even as Catherine nodded, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Billy Tucker had escalated from words to violence. What would he try next? Dawn broke gray and ugly over the smoldering ruins of the barn, and Catherine couldn't stop her hands from shaking as she tried to milk the cow. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her jump. The baby inside her seemed to sense her fear, rolling and kicking restlessly. She'd barely slept, startling awake every few minutes at imagined sounds. Footsteps that turned out to be mice. Voices that were only whined through the trees. The smell of smoke that might have been real or might have been memory. You're going to make yourself sick if you keep this up, Ezra said, appearing beside the makeshift shelter he'd built for the horses. His clothes were covered in soot, and dark circles ringed his eyes. He hadn't slept either. I can't help it, Catherine admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see that fire. I hear Thunder screaming. They're safe now. We're all safe. For how long? The words burst out of her before she could stop them. What happens tonight? Tomorrow? Next week? How long before Billy decides that burning down a barn wasn't enough? Ezra was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. I've been thinking about that too. And I think it's time we stopped playing defense and started playing offense. Catherine set down the milk pail and stared at him. What do you mean? I mean, Billy Tucker has been getting away with his behavior because nobody's ever stood up to him. His father protects him, the sheriff looks the other way, and decent folks are too scared to speak up. Ezra's eyes were hard as flint. Maybe it's time that changed. You can't fight him alone. He's got friends, and they'll all stand together. Who says I'd be alone? Ezra helped her to her feet. There are other people in this territory who are tired of Billy's bullying. Other folks who've been pushed around and told to keep quiet. Catherine felt a flicker of hope, quickly followed by doubt. Even if that's true, what can you do? He's the sheriff's nephew. He's got money and connections. Money and connections don't mean much when you're outnumbered by people who've had enough. Ezra picked up the milk pail. I'm going to town today. Time to have some conversations. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than staying here alone? What if Billy comes back while you're gone? Catherine crossed her arms over her chest. Besides, some of those conversations might go better if I'm there. People need to see that I'm a real person, not just a rumor. Ezra opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. You're the most stubborn woman in the Nebraska Territory. Is that a yes? That's a yes. But we do this my way. You stay close to me. And if things get ugly, you get somewhere safe. Understood? The ride to town was tense and quiet. Catherine sat beside Ezra on the wagon seat, trying to ignore the curious stares of people they passed. Word of the fire had already spread, she could tell. Folks whispered behind their hands and pointed at the wagon. Their first stop was the general store, where Tom Bradley was sweeping the front steps. He looked up as they approached, his weathered face creasing into a frown. Heard about your barn, he said without preamble. Shame. Good barn that was. It was, Ezra agreed. Tom, I'd like you to meet Catherine Mayfield. She's been working for me, taking care of the horses. Tom nodded politely, but Catherine could see the questions in his eyes. She lifted her chin and met his gaze directly. Mr. Bradley, she said, I've heard you make the best horseshoes in 3 counties. That's what they tell me. Tom's expression softened slightly. You know horses? Some. Enough to know that good shoes can make the difference between a sound horse and a lame one. Indeed they can. Tom studied her for a moment. Ezra, what really happened to your barn? Someone set it on fire, on purpose. Tom's jaw tightened. Billy Tucker? Can't prove it, but it fits his pattern. Boy's been nothing but trouble since he could walk, Tom muttered. His father ought to take a strap to him, but he's too busy making excuses. Thing is, Tom, Billy's not going to stop with one barn. He's testing to see what he can get away with. If nobody stands up to him, he'll just get bolder. Tom nodded slowly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time the decent folks in this town started working together. Time we stopped letting bullies make the rules. Count me in, Tom said without hesitation. Billy Tucker cost me business last month, spreading lies about my work. Said I was cheating customers. Took weeks to undo the damage. Their next stop was the church, where Reverend Johnson was tending his small garden behind the parsonage. He straightened when he saw them coming, brushing dirt from his hands. Ezra? Miss. He paused, clearly uncertain how to address Catherine. Mayfield, she supplied. Catherine Mayfield. Miss Mayfield, I heard about the fire. Terrible thing. I've been praying for your safety. Thank you, Reverend, Catherine said quietly. Your prayers are appreciated. Reverend, Ezra said, I need to ask you something. Do you believe in forgiveness? In second chances? Of course, that's at the heart of our faith. What about when someone's made a mistake? A young woman who trusted the wrong man, maybe. Does she deserve to be punished forever? Does her child deserve to grow up with shame? Reverend Johnson looked at Catherine, really looked at her, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. Every child is a blessing, he said firmly. Every soul deserves compassion. If someone has repented of their mistakes and is trying to live a good life, then yes, they deserve a second chance. Even if other people disapprove, even if it causes talk, especially then. The Reverend's voice grew stronger. It's easy to show kindness to people who've never stumbled. The real test of our character is how we treat those who need help most. By midday, they'd visited 6 more people. The widow, Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house, old Sam Peters, who owned the livery stable, the young couple who'd just started a farm north of town, and others. Not everyone was receptive, but more people than Catherine had expected were willing to listen. Billy Tucker's been like a stone in everyone's shoe, Mrs. Chen observed. Nobody wants to be the first to complain, but we're all tired of his behavior. What are you proposing? Sam Peters asked. A meeting, Ezra said. Tonight, at my place. Everyone who's tired of being pushed around. Time we stood together instead of standing alone. As they prepared to leave town, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real hope. Not just the desperate kind that came from having no other choice. "Do you think they'll really come?" she asked. "Some will. Maybe not all, but some." Ezra helped her up onto the wagon seat. "Change doesn't happen all at once, Catherine. It happens one person at a time, one choice at a time." As they drove back toward the ranch, Catherine allowed herself to imagine a different future, a place where she could raise her child without shame, where people judged others by their actions, not their circumstances. But as they crested the hill overlooking the ranch, her hope curdled into fear. 3 horses stood tied to the porch rail, and she recognized one of them immediately. Billy Tucker was waiting for them, and this time he hadn't come alone. Blood trickled down Catherine's cheek, where Billy Tucker's ring had caught her skin, but she refused to cry out as he grabbed her arm and dragged her toward his horse. The 2 men with him, Jake Morrison and Pete Dalton, flanked Ezra with guns drawn, their faces hard as winter stone. "Let her go, Billy," Ezra said, his voice deadly calm despite the rifle barrel pressed against his ribs. "Your fight's with me, not her." "See, that's where you're wrong." Billy's grip tightened on Catherine's wrist until she gasped. "My fight's with anyone who thinks they can make a fool of me. And this little whore has been making fools of all of us." "I've done nothing to you," Catherine said, trying to pull free. The baby kicked hard inside her, as if it could sense the danger. "Nothing?" Billy laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think I don't know what you've been doing? Riding around town today like you belong here, like you're some kind of respectable woman, instead of what you really are. What I really am is none of your business." Billy's free hand cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. "It became my business when you and your boyfriend here started turning people against me." Ezra surged forward, but Jake Morrison shoved the rifle harder into his side. "Easy there, hero. Wouldn't want this gun to go off accidentally." "Tom Bradley, Mrs. Chen, Sam Peters." Billy counted off on his fingers. "All of them singing a different tune after you paid them a visit today. Funny how people change their minds when they get the wrong kind of influence." Catherine's mind raced. How did he know who they'd talked to? Had someone been watching them, reporting back to Billy? "People have minds of their own," she said. "Maybe they're just tired of being bullied." "Bullied?" Billy's eyes narrowed. "I keep this town safe. I keep decent folks from having to associate with trash like you." "You keep yourself important," Ezra said quietly. "There's a difference." Pete Dalton, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Billy, maybe we should just run them out of town. No need for this to get messy." "Shut up, Pete. This needs to be permanent." Billy pulled Catherine closer to his horse. "See, people need to understand what happens when they cross me. When they protect people who don't deserve protection." "Where are you taking her?" Ezra demanded. "Somewhere she can think about her choices. Somewhere she can decide if she wants to keep causing trouble or if she wants to disappear quietly." Catherine felt ice form in her stomach. "You can't just take me. People will notice I'm gone." "Will they? A fallen woman who was here one day and gone the next? Sounds like the kind of thing that happens all the time." Billy swung up onto his horse and reached down for her. "Now come on. We've got a long ride ahead of us. I'm not going anywhere with you." Billy's face darkened. "You don't have a choice." He nodded to Jake Morrison, who stepped closer to Ezra. "Here's how this works," Billy said. "You can come with me quietly, or my friend Jake here can put a bullet in your boyfriend's knee, then his other knee. Then maybe we get creative." Catherine looked at Ezra, saw the helpless fury in his eyes. He was outnumbered and outgunned, but she could see him calculating, looking for an opening. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't try to be a hero. Not for me." "Catherine, he's not worth it." She looked up at Billy, hatred burning in her chest. "I'll go, but if you hurt him, I'll make you regret it." Billy laughed. "You? What are you going to do? Throw your knitting at me?" Catherine let him pull her up onto his horse, her mind working frantically. She needed to buy time, needed to think. Maybe the people they'd talked to in town would come looking when they didn't show up for the meeting. Maybe someone would notice she was missing. As they rode away from the ranch, Catherine caught a glimpse of Ezra in the yard, Jake Morrison's rifle still trained on him. He was watching her go with an expression of pure anguish, and she wanted to call out to him, to tell him she'd be all right. But she wasn't sure that was true. They rode for an hour through country Catherine didn't recognize, following game trails and creek beds that wound deeper into the wilderness. Billy seemed to know exactly where he was going, and that scared her more than anything else. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He'd planned this. "Where are we going?" she asked when they stopped to water the horses. "Old mining camp," Billy said, not looking at her. "Been abandoned for years. Nice and quiet. Good place for people to disappear." Pete Dalton shifted uncomfortably. "Billy, I don't like this. Taking her was one thing, but if you're talking about... I'm talking about solving a problem permanently." Billy's voice was cold. "This town needs to know what happens to people who don't know their place." "I never asked for trouble," Catherine said. "I just wanted a job, a place to live, a chance to raise my child in peace." "You're bastard, you mean?" Billy spat on the ground. "Another mouth for decent folks to feed when you can't take care of it yourself. I can take care of my child just fine." "Can you? What kind of life is a bastard going to have? What kind of mother are you going to be?" Billy stepped closer, his face twisted with disgust. "You think Ezra McKinnon is going to marry you? Make an honest woman out of you? He's just using you, same as the man who got you in this condition in the first place." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't give Billy the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Ezra's a good man," she said. "Ezra's a fool. And when he comes looking for you, and he will, he's going to find out what happens to fools who protect whores." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. "He's coming after me?" "Of course he is. Man's besotted with you for reasons I can't fathom. He'll come riding up here like some kind of knight in shining armor, thinking he can rescue you." Billy's smile was cruel. "That's when Jake and Pete here are going to teach him some manners." Catherine's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about punishing her. This was a trap. Billy was using her as bait to lure Ezra into an ambush. "You can't," she whispered. "I can do whatever I want. That's the beauty of being on the right side of the law." Billy remounted his horse. "My uncle the sheriff will be very sorry to hear that Ezra McKinnon was killed while trying to steal horses from an honest rancher. Of course, there won't be any witnesses to say different." As they rode deeper into the wilderness, Catherine felt despair settle over her like a blanket. Billy had thought of everything. Ezra would come for her. She knew he would. And when he did, he'd be walking into a trap that would get him killed. Unless she could find a way to warn him. Unless she could find a way to escape. The baby kicked inside her, and Catherine pressed her hand to her belly. "I know, little one," she whispered. "Mama's scared too, but we're not giving up. Not yet." They reached the mining camp just as the sun was setting. It was a desolate place. A few ramshackle buildings clustered around the mouth of a played-out mine, everything gray and rotting. The perfect place for something terrible to happen. "Home sweet home," Billy said, pulling her down from the horse. "Hope you're comfortable here, because you're going to be staying for a while." As he shoved her toward the largest building, Catherine caught sight of something that made her heart race. Hoofprints in the dirt, fresh ones, leading away from the camp. Someone else had been here recently, someone who might still be close enough to help. If she could just find a way to signal them. Ezra's hands shook as he saddled Thunder in the failing light, his mind spinning with plans that all ended badly. 3 hours had passed since Billy Tucker rode away with Catherine, and every minute that ticked by made rescue less likely and revenge more certain. "You can't go alone," Tom Bradley said for the third time. The blacksmith had arrived at the ranch 20 minutes after Billy left, followed by Sam Peters and Mrs. Chen. The meeting they'd planned was happening anyway, just not how anyone had expected. "They're expecting me to come alone," Ezra replied, checking his rifle. "If I bring help, they might hurt her." "If you go alone, they'll kill you both." Mrs. Chen's voice was sharp with worry. "Billy Tucker's not going to let either of you walk away from this." Ezra knew she was right. Billy had moved past intimidation into something much darker. This wasn't about scaring Catherine away anymore. This was about making an example that would terrify anyone else who might stand up to him. "Then what do you suggest?" Ezra asked. We follow at a distance, Sam Peter said. Let you go in first, but be close enough to help when things go bad. And they will go bad, Tom added grimly. Billy's got Jake Morrison and Pete Dalton with him. Both of them are handy with guns. Thunder snorted and stamped his feet, sensing Ezra's tension. The big stallion was still skittish from the fire, but he was the fastest horse Ezra owned. If there was any chance of catching up to Billy's group before they reached wherever they were going, Thunder was his best hope. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Something you need to know about Billy Tucker. Ezra paused in adjusting Thunder's bridle. What? My late husband used to work for Billy's father. He told me things about what Billy was like as a boy. Mrs. Chen's face was pale. There were incidents, animals that went missing, a barn cat that was found, that hurt, a neighbor's dog that disappeared and turned up weeks later. Ezra felt ice form in his stomach. You're saying he's killed before? I'm saying he's got a taste for causing pain, and he's good at making it look like accidents. Mrs. Chen touched Ezra's arm. If you go after him, you need to be prepared for anything. As if summoned by their conversation, another horse approached the ranch. Ezra's hand went to his gun, but he relaxed when he recognized the rider. It was David Morrison, Jake's younger brother, and one of the few decent members of that family. Ezra, David called, sliding down from his horse before it had fully stopped. I've been looking for you. It's about Jake and Billy Tucker. What about them? I overheard them talking yesterday. They were planning something. Something about teaching you and that woman a lesson. David's face was flushed with exertion and worry. Jake said they were going to take her to the old Copper Creek mine. Said it was the perfect place because nobody ever goes there anymore. Ezra's heart leaped. Copper Creek was 10 miles north, up in the hills where the original settlers had tried mining before giving up and turning to farming. He knew the area well, had hunted there as a boy. Why are you telling me this? Ezra asked. Jake's your brother. Jake's a fool who's gotten mixed up with the wrong people, David said flatly. But he's not a killer. Not yet. If I can get there before this goes too far, maybe I can talk sense into him. It's a trap, Sam Peter said. Billy's using Catherine as bait to lure Ezra into an ambush. I know, David's voice was grim. That's why we need to get there fast, before Billy has time to set up properly. Tom Bradley was already moving toward his horse. Then we better get riding. No, Ezra said. David and I go first. The rest of you follow in an hour. If we're not back by dawn. He didn't finish the sentence. We come in shooting, Mrs. Chen said firmly. This ends tonight, one way or another. The ride to Copper Creek took them through rough country, steep hills, and narrow valleys where Thunder had to pick his way carefully through loose rock and fallen trees. David led the way on his smaller horse, following game trails that Ezra had forgotten existed. There, David said as they crested a ridge. Below them, the abandoned mining camp sprawled in a valley, like a collection of broken toys. Smoke rose from one of the buildings, and they could see horses tied up outside. Looks like they're settled in for the night. Ezra studied the layout through the gathering darkness. 3 buildings still standing, with the largest one showing light in the windows. The mine entrance yawned black behind them, and scattered equipment rusted in the weeds. How do we do this? David asked. Carefully. Ezra dismounted and tied Thunder to a tree. Billy's expecting me to come charging in like an angry bull. Instead, we're going to be smart about it. They worked their way down the hillside on foot, using the scattered mining equipment as cover. As they got closer, Ezra could hear voices from the main building. Billy's laugh, sharp and cruel, followed by a woman's voice raised in anger. Catherine, she was alive, and she was fighting back. Jake's on the porch, David whispered, pointing to a shadow near the door. Pete's probably inside with Billy and the woman. Ezra nodded. Can you get Jake's attention? Draw him away from the building? What are you going to do? Something stupid, probably. Ezra checked his rifle. Give me 5 minutes, then make some noise on the far side of camp. When Jake goes to investigate, I'll go through the back. David disappeared into the shadows, and Ezra worked his way around to the rear of the building. Through a crack in the wall, he could see inside. Catherine sat on a wooden crate, her hands tied behind her back but her chin raised defiantly. Billy paced in front of her, while Pete Dalton lounged against the wall, looking uncomfortable. "You keep telling yourself that McKinnon cares about you," Billy was saying. "But where is he? It's been hours, and no sign of your knight in shining armor." "He'll come," Catherine said firmly. "Oh, I'm counting on it. Question is, will there be enough left of you to make it worth his while?" Billy pulled out a knife, and Ezra's blood turned to ice. This had gone far enough. A crash echoed from across the camp, David doing his part. Jake Morrison's voice called out, and Ezra heard footsteps moving away from the building. Now or never. Ezra kicked in the back door and rolled inside, his rifle trained on Pete Dalton. "Drop your gun." Pete's hand went to his pistol, but Catherine suddenly threw herself sideways, knocking over the crate and tangling his feet. He stumbled, and Ezra's rifle butt caught him across the temple. Pete dropped like a stone. Billy spun around, his knife still in his hand. "Well, well, the hero arrives." "Let her go, Billy. This is between you and me." "Is it?" Billy grabbed Catherine by the hair and hauled her to her feet, pressing the knife to her throat. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've got feelings for this little whore, which makes her very much part of our business." Ezra kept his rifle steady, but his heart was hammering. One wrong move, and Catherine would die. "What do you want?" he asked. "What I've always wanted. Respect. Fear. The knowledge that when Billy Tucker says something, people listen." Billy's eyes glittered in the lamplight. "And right now, I'm saying that fallen women don't belong in our town. Neither do the men who protect them." Outside, Ezra could hear shouting, David and Jake, probably arguing. How long before Jake came back? How long before Billy's patience ran out? "I'll leave," Catherine said suddenly. "I'll go away, and you'll never see me again. Just don't hurt him." "No," Ezra said. "You're not going anywhere." "See," Billy laughed. "Even now, he's more worried about keeping his whore than saving his own life. Pathetic." The knife pressed closer to Catherine's throat, and Ezra saw a thin line of blood appear on her skin. That's when Thunder's scream split the night like a battle cry, and everything changed. Thunder's hooves thundered against the wooden porch like rolling thunder. And Billy Tucker's knife jerked away from Catherine's throat as the massive stallion burst through the doorway in an explosion of splintered wood and flying debris. The black horse reared up on his hind legs, his eyes wild with the same fury that had carried him through the barn fire, his iron shoes flashing in the lamplight. "What the hell?" Billy stumbled backward, dragging Catherine with him as Thunder landed and wheeled around in the small space. The building shook under the horse's weight, and dust rained down from the ceiling beams. Ezra didn't waste the opportunity. He dove forward, tackling Billy around the waist and sending them both crashing into the wall. Catherine rolled away as the two men hit the floor, Billy's knife skittering across the wooden planks. Thunder snorted and stamped, blocking the doorway like a four-legged fortress. His ears were pinned back flat against his head, and he bared his teeth at anyone who tried to get past him. The stallion had always been protective of Catherine, but this was something more. This was revenge for the fire, for the terror, for the threat to his human family. Billy threw a wild punch that caught Ezra in the jaw, snapping his head back. They rolled across the floor, fighting for control, while Catherine struggled with the ropes around her wrists. Her fingers were numb from the tight bindings, but she could feel the knots starting to give way. "Jake," Billy shouted as he wrapped his arm around Ezra's throat. "Jake, get in here!" But Jake Morrison was having problems of his own. Outside, Catherine could hear him arguing with his brother David, their voices raised in anger and confusion. Thunder's dramatic entrance had scattered the horses and created chaos in the camp. "Let go of me, David. Billy needs help. Billy needs to be stopped. This has gone too far." "You don't understand." "I understand plenty. You're going to get people killed." Catherine finally worked one hand free and quickly untied the other. Her wrists were raw and bleeding, but she was loose. She looked around for a weapon, anything she could use to help Ezra. Billy had gotten on top of Ezra and was pressing his forearm against Ezra's windpipe. Ezra's face was turning red as he struggled to breathe, his hands clawing at Billy's arms. Catherine grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a heavy iron candlestick from a makeshift table. Without hesitation, she brought it down hard on the back of Billy's head. Billy's eyes rolled back and he slumped forward, unconscious. Ezra gasped and pushed him off, rolling to his hands and knees as he fought to catch his breath. "Are you all right?" Catherine knelt beside him, her hands checking for injuries. "Fine," Ezra wheezed. "Just give me a minute." Thunder whinnied softly and stepped closer, lowering his great head to nuzzle Catherine's shoulder. She reached up to stroke his neck, still amazed that he had somehow found them. "How did you get here, boy?" she whispered. "How did you know we needed help?" "Horses know things," Ezra said, his breathing slowly returning to normal. "They can sense when their people are in danger. Thunder must have followed our trail." Pete Dalton was still unconscious in the corner where Ezra had struck him. Billy was breathing but out cold. For the moment, they were safe. "We need to get out of here," Catherine said, "before Jake comes back, or before Billy wakes up." Ezra nodded and started to stand, then froze. "Do you hear that?" Catherine listened. In the distance, she could hear the sound of multiple horses approaching fast. More of Billy's friends? "I don't think so." Ezra moved to the broken doorway and peered out into the darkness. "Those are our people. Tom Bradley, Sam Peters, Mrs. Chen. They came after all." Sure enough, a group of riders thundered into the mining camp, their torches casting dancing shadows on the abandoned buildings. Catherine recognized Tom Bradley's voice calling out. "Ezra, Catherine, where are you?" "Here," Ezra shouted back. "We're in the main building." Within minutes, the building was full of people. Tom Bradley took one look at the unconscious Billy Tucker and spat on the floor. About time someone knocked some sense into that boy. Mrs. Chen rushed to Catherine's side, checking her over with motherly concern. "Are you hurt? Did they?" She couldn't finish the question. "I'm fine," Catherine assured her. "Scared, but fine. The baby's still kicking, so I think we're both all right." Sam Peters was tying up Pete Dalton with a rope from his saddle. "What do we do with these two?" "Take them to the sheriff," Ezra said. "Billy's uncle? He'll just let them go with a warning." Tom's voice was bitter. "Not if we all stand together. Not if we all tell the same story about what happened here." Ezra looked around at the faces of the people who had come to help them. Billy Tucker kidnapped a pregnant woman and threatened to kill her. That's a serious crime, even if his uncle is the sheriff. David Morrison appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Jake's gone. Rode off when he saw all of you coming. But he'll be back, probably with more men." "Then we better move fast," Mrs. Chen said. "Get these two to town before Jake can cause more trouble." As they prepared to leave the mining camp, Catherine felt Thunder nuzzle her shoulder again. She turned to stroke his face, still overwhelmed by what the horse had done. "You saved our lives," she whispered. "How did you know to come here?" Thunder's dark eyes seemed to hold an ancient wisdom. He had been hurt and abandoned, just like Catherine. He had learned to trust again, just like she was learning. And when the people he loved were in danger, he had found the courage to act. "Animals don't judge," Catherine had told Ezra weeks ago. "They just love." Now she understood how deep that love could go. The ride back to town was tense but uneventful. They kept Billy and Pete tied up and unconscious, slung over their horses like sacks of grain. David Morrison rode with them, his face set with determination. "What are you going to tell the sheriff?" Catherine asked him. "The truth, that my brother got mixed up with a bad crowd and nearly got people killed. That Billy Tucker is a danger to this community and needs to be stopped." "Your own brother?" "Jake made his choice. Now I'm making mine." David's voice was steady. "Some things are more important than family loyalty." As they approached the town, Catherine could see lights in many of the windows despite the late hour. Word had already spread about the confrontation at the mine. People were gathering, waiting to see what would happen next. "Are you ready for this?" Ezra asked her quietly. Catherine looked ahead at the town that had judged her so harshly, at the people who had whispered behind her back and called her names. Then she looked at the faces of the men and women who had risked their lives to save her: Tom Bradley, Sam Peters, Mrs. Chen, David Morrison, and others. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." The time for hiding was over. The time for shame was past. Tonight, she would stand up in front of the whole town and tell her story, Not the version that gossips had created, but the truth. And if they didn't like it, that was their problem, not hers. Thunder snorted and tossed his head as they rode into town, as if he agreed with her decision. The big stallion had learned to be brave again. Now it was Catherine's turn. The sheriff's office blazed with light like a beacon in the dark, and half the town seemed to be crowded around its front steps when Ezra's group arrived with their prisoners. Sheriff Wade Tucker, Billy's uncle, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, his face stormy as thunderclouds. Behind him, Catherine could see the glint of rifle barrels as deputies prepared for trouble. "What's the meaning of this?" Sheriff Tucker demanded as Tom Bradley and Sam Peters hauled the still unconscious Billy and Pete from their horses. "You can't just ride into my town with prisoners like some kind of vigilante mob." "We can when your nephew kidnaps innocent women," Mrs. Chen shot back, her usual polite manner replaced by righteous anger. "Where we come from, that's called justice." "Kidnapping?" The sheriff's voice rose. "That's a serious accusation. You better have proof." Catherine slid down from Thunder's back, her legs shaky from the long ride and the night's events. Every eye in the crowd turned to her, and she felt the familiar weight of judgment settling on her shoulders. But this time, she didn't bend under it. "I'm the proof," she said, stepping forward into the circle of lamplight. "Billy Tucker and his friends took me from Ezra's ranch at gunpoint. They threatened to kill both of us if I didn't go with them quietly." "That's her word against theirs," Sheriff Tucker said dismissively. "And considering her circumstances, I'm not sure how reliable her testimony would be." The words hit Catherine like a slap, but before she could respond, David Morrison stepped forward. "Then take my word for it," he said firmly. "I followed them to the mine. I heard Billy threaten to kill her and Ezra both. I saw him hold a knife to her throat." "David Morrison, you're talking about your own brother," the sheriff warned. "I'm talking about the truth." David's voice never wavered. "Jake got mixed up with Billy's schemes, and now people could have died because of it. That's not something I can stay quiet about." A murmur ran through the crowd. David Morrison was known as an honest man, someone who kept his word and paid his debts. His testimony carried weight. "There's something else," Tom Bradley said, pushing forward. "Show them your neck, Miss Catherine." Catherine hesitated, then pulled aside the collar of her dress. A thin line of dried blood marked where Billy's knife had pressed against her throat. The crowd gasped, and even Sheriff Tucker's face went pale. "Billy did that?" a woman's voice called from the crowd. "Cut a pregnant woman?" "He threatened to do worse," Ezra said, his voice carrying clearly in the night air. If David hadn't distracted Jake Morrison, and if Thunder hadn't broken down the door when he did, Catherine might be dead right now. "Thunder?" someone laughed. "A horse broke down the door?" "That horse has more sense than most people," Mrs. Chen declared. "He knew his family was in danger, and he did something about it." As if summoned by his name, Thunder pushed through the crowd, his reins dragging. He walked straight to Catherine and nuzzled her shoulder, then turned to face the sheriff with his ears pinned back. Even the big stallion seemed to understand that this man was not a friend. Sheriff Tucker stared at the horse, then at his nephew's unconscious form, then at the crowd of faces surrounding him. Catherine could see him calculating, trying to find a way to protect Billy without losing his own position. "Even if what you say is true," he said finally, "boys will be boys. Billy's young. He makes mistakes. Maybe he just got carried away." "Carried away?" The voice that cut through the night belonged to Reverend Johnson, who pushed through the crowd with his Bible clutched in his hands. "Sheriff Tucker, I've been ministering to this community for 15 years, and I've never seen anything more clear-cut than this. Reverend, with respect, this is a matter for the law." "This is a matter for justice," the Reverend interrupted. "And justice doesn't care about family connections or who your uncle happens to be." Catherine watched in amazement as more voices joined the Reverend's. People she'd never even spoken to stepped forward to support her story. The young couple who ran the bakery, old Henrik the blacksmith. Even Martha Henley, the woman who'd complained about her daughters riding past the ranch. "I was wrong about you, Miss Mayfield," Martha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I let fear and gossip cloud my judgment. But what Billy did tonight, that's not justice. That's not protecting anyone. That's just cruelty. Sheriff Tucker's face was red with anger and embarrassment. You people don't understand the situation? We understand it perfectly, Sam Peters said. Your nephew is a bully and a criminal, and you've been protecting him for too long. He threatened a pregnant woman with a knife, Tom Bradley added. That's not a boyish mistake. That's the action of a dangerous man. The crowd murmured agreement, and Catherine felt something shift in the air around them. These people, her neighbors, whether she'd known it or not, were standing up for her. They were choosing what was right over what was easy. What do you want me to do? Sheriff Tucker asked, his voice defeated. Your job, Ezra said simply. Arrest Billy Tucker and Pete Dalton for kidnapping and assault. Hold them for trial. Let a judge and jury decide their fate. And if I refuse, then we'll take this to the territorial governor, Mrs. Chen said firmly. I'm sure he'd be very interested to hear about a sheriff who protects criminals instead of victims. Billy Tucker chose that moment to groan and stir, consciousness slowly returning. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused, then sharpened as he saw where he was. Uncle Wade? He said weakly. What happened? You kidnapped a woman, you fool, Sheriff Tucker said, his voice harsh with frustration. Nearly got yourself killed in the process. Billy tried to sit up, then winced and fell back. She's lying. They're all lying. I was just trying to protect the community. By threatening to murder people? David Morrison stepped into Billy's line of sight. I heard you, Billy. I heard every word you said at that mine. Billy's face went white as he realized that Jake's own brother was testifying against him. David, you don't understand. I understand that you've crossed a line you can't come back from. David's voice was sad but firm. Jake's in trouble too, but at least he had the sense to run when he saw how bad this was getting. Sheriff Tucker looked around at the crowd, at the determined faces, at his nephew's pale and frightened expression. Finally, he sighed heavily. Pete Dalton, Billy Tucker, you're under arrest for kidnapping and assault, he said formally. You have the right to— Uncle Wade, you can't. Billy struggled against his bonds. These people are nobody. She's just a whore. Why are you listening to them? The crowd's reaction was immediate and angry. Shouts of outrage filled the air, and several men stepped forward with their fists clenched. That's enough, Reverend Johnson's voice boomed over the crowd. Billy Tucker, you've shown your true character tonight, and it's ugly. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of shame anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of relief, of something that felt almost like belonging. Thank you, she said to the crowd, her voice shaking with emotion. All of you, thank you for standing up for what's right. You don't need to thank us, Martha Henley said, stepping forward. We should have done this a long time ago. Should have stood up to bullies like Billy Tucker before it got this far. As the sheriff and his deputies loaded Billy and Pete into the jail wagon, Catherine felt Ezra's hand slip into hers. His fingers were warm and strong, and when she looked up at him, she saw pride shining in his eyes. You did it, he said quietly. You stood up to them. You didn't back down. We did it, she corrected. All of us together. Thunder snorted and shook his mane, as if reminding them that he'd played a part too. Catherine laughed and reached up to scratch behind his ears. You too, big boy. Especially you. As the crowd began to disperse, people stopping to shake hands with Catherine and Ezra, to offer words of support and promises of help, Catherine felt something she'd never experienced before. She felt like she belonged. For the first time in her life, she was part of a community that valued her for who she was, not for the mistakes she'd made or the circumstances of her birth. These people had seen her at her most vulnerable and had chosen to stand with her anyway. The baby kicked inside her, and Catherine smiled. Her child would grow up here, in this place where people stood up for each other, where bullies were stopped and victims were protected, where love mattered more than judgment. A telegram arrived with the morning mail 3 weeks later, and Catherine's hands trembled as she recognized the handwriting on the envelope that came with it. James Morton had found her again, just when she'd finally started to believe she might be safe. The yellow paper crackled as she unfolded it, and the words hit her like a physical blow. Coming for what's mine. Arriving Tuesday. Be ready. J.M. Today was Monday. Catherine sank into the kitchen chair, her hand automatically going to her belly, where the baby was growing strong and healthy. At 7 months along, she could no longer hide her condition, but she'd grown comfortable with it here on the ranch. The people in town had accepted her, respected her even. She'd started to believe that maybe her past couldn't reach her here. She'd been wrong. "What's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" Ezra asked, coming in from the barn with dust on his clothes and concern in his gray eyes. Over the past weeks, their friendship had deepened into something more: stolen glances, hands that lingered when they touched, conversations that went late into the night on the front porch. Catherine held out the telegram without a word. Ezra read it quickly, his jaw tightening with each word. "Who's James Morton?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected. "The father," Catherine whispered. "The man who left me when I told him about the baby." "What does he want?" "I don't know. Money, maybe? Or—" She couldn't finish the thought. What if James had heard about her new life here? What if he thought he could force her into marriage now that she'd found some stability? Ezra set the telegram on the table and knelt beside her chair. "Whatever he wants, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." "But what if he has legal rights? What if the law says the baby belongs to him?" Catherine's voice rose with panic. "What if he can take my child away from me?" "That's not going to happen." Ezra's voice was firm, but Catherine could see worry in his eyes too. "We'll talk to a lawyer. We'll figure out what your rights are." "With what money? Lawyers cost more than I'll make in a year feeding horses." Ezra was quiet for a moment, then stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Thunder and Molly grazed peacefully in the pasture, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. The new barn was nearly finished, bigger and better than the one Billy Tucker had burned down. "There's something I need to tell you," Ezra said finally. "Something I should have said weeks ago." Catherine felt her heart skip. "What?" "I love you." The words came out quietly, but with absolute certainty. "I love you, and I love that baby you're carrying, and I want to spend the rest of my life taking care of both of you." Catherine stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Ezra, I know you probably think I'm just being kind. I know you've been hurt before, and you've got every reason not to trust men who make promises." He turned back to face her. "But I'm not James Morton. I'm not going to disappear when things get difficult." "How can you be sure? You don't even know what I was like before I came here. What if James tells you things about me that change how you feel?" "Nothing he says will change how I feel." Ezra moved back to her side. "I know who you are, Catherine. I've watched you get up before dawn every day to take care of my horses. I've seen you mend clothes by lamplight to save money. I've watched you stand up to bullies and protect people you care about. But the baby isn't yours. It's his." "No." Ezra's voice was gentle but firm. "Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Care does. Being there every day does." He knelt beside her chair again. "If you'll let me, I want to be that baby's father. I want to teach him to ride horses and fish in the creek. I want to read her bedtime stories and scare away nightmares." Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying marry me. Before James Morton gets here, make it legal and binding so he can't touch you or the baby." Ezra reached for her hands. "I know it's not romantic, proposing because of a telegram. I know you might need time to think about it, but—" "Yes," Catherine interrupted. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ezra blinked in surprise. "Just like that?" "Just like that." Catherine wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I love you too, Ezra McKinnon. I've loved you since the day you offered me work without asking any questions. I've loved you since you defended me to those men in the yard. I've loved you since you risked your life to save me from Billy Tucker." Ezra's face broke into a grin that transformed his entire appearance. "Then we'd better get to town and find Reverend Johnson. If James Morton is coming tomorrow, we need to be married today." The ride to town was a blur of nervous excitement and practical planning. They would need witnesses and someone to stand up with them. And, "What about a dress?" Catherine asked suddenly. "I can't get married in work clothes." "You could get married in a flour sack and still be the most beautiful bride in Nebraska territory," Ezra said. but his expression turned thoughtful. Though I bet Mrs. Chen might have something that would work. Mrs. Chen not only had a dress, her own wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper, but she also insisted on organizing the entire ceremony. Within 2 hours, word had spread throughout the town, and the little church was filled with people who had become Catherine's friends and neighbors. "I can't believe this is happening," Catherine whispered to Martha Henley, who was helping her get ready in the church's back room. "This morning I was terrified, and now, you're getting married to a good man who loves you," Martha said, adjusting the lace on Catherine's borrowed dress. "Sometimes the best things in life happen when we least expect them." Through the door, Catherine could hear the murmur of voices as people filled the pews. Tom Bradley was there, and Sam Peters, and David Morrison. Even some folks she barely knew had come to witness the ceremony. "Are you ready?" Reverend Johnson asked, poking his head through the door. Catherine looked at herself in the small mirror Mrs. Chen had brought. The white dress fit perfectly, despite her condition. Her hair was pinned up with flowers that Martha had picked from her garden. She looked like a bride. She felt like a bride. "I'm ready," she said. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Ezra stood at the altar in his best suit, his hair combed back and his eyes shining with happiness. When Catherine walked down the aisle on Tom Bradley's arm, he'd volunteered to give her away, she felt like she was walking into a new life. "Do you, Catherine Mayfield, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Reverend Johnson asked. "I do," Catherine said, her voice clear and strong. "Do you, Ezra McKinnon, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Ezra replied, slipping a simple gold band onto her finger. "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Nebraska, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Ezra's kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise for the future. The crowd cheered, and Catherine felt a joy so pure it made her dizzy. As they walked back down the aisle together, Catherine caught sight of Thunder through the church window. The big stallion was tied to the hitching post, and he lifted his head as if he could sense the celebration inside. He'd come so far from the scared, angry horse Ezra had first brought home, just like she had. At the reception in Mrs. Chen's boarding house, people made toasts and shared stories and danced to music from old Henrik's fiddle. Catherine found herself laughing more than she had in years, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her happiness. But as the evening wore on, she couldn't completely forget about the telegram. James Morton was still coming. Tomorrow, she would have to face her past one more time. The difference was, this time she wouldn't be facing it alone. "What are you thinking about?" Ezra asked, finding her on the front porch of the boarding house as the party continued inside. "Tomorrow," Catherine admitted. "What happens when James gets here?" "Tomorrow, you'll be Mrs. Catherine McKinnon, wife of a respected rancher and member of this community," Ezra said firmly. "Whatever claims James Morton thinks he has, they don't matter anymore." Catherine leaned against her husband's shoulder, still amazed that she could call him that. "I hope you're right." "I am right. And even if I'm not, we'll figure it out together." Ezra wrapped his arms around her. "That's what married people do." As they sat there in the evening air, Catherine allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her troubles were finally over. She was wrong. James Morton arrived like a thunderstorm on wheels, his rented buggy kicking up dust clouds that could be seen from miles across the prairie. Catherine watched from the kitchen window as he approached the ranch, her wedding ring catching the morning light as her hand gripped the curtain. Even from a distance, she could see that he looked exactly the same, handsome in a cold way, dressed in expensive clothes that marked him as a city man, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from always getting what he wanted. Until now. "He's here," she called to Ezra, who was in the barn checking on the horses. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Ezra emerged from the barn, moving with the easy grace of a man on his own land. He'd dressed carefully this morning. Clean shirt, good pants, boots polished to a shine. He looked every inch the successful rancher, and Catherine felt a surge of pride watching him approach the house. James pulled his buggy to a stop in the yard and sat for a moment, taking in the ranch with calculating eyes. Catherine could almost see him adding up the value of the land, the livestock, the new barn rising from its foundation. Then his gaze shifted to the house, and even through the window, she could feel the weight of his stare. "Catherine!" His voice carried clearly across the yard, sharp with command. "Come out here, we need to talk." Instead of obeying, Catherine stepped onto the porch beside Ezra. She wore her best dress, the blue one with the small flowers that Ezra had bought her as a wedding gift. Her hair was pinned up proper, and she carried herself with the dignity of a woman who belonged exactly where she was. "Hello, James," she said, her voice calm despite the turmoil inside her. James climbed down from the buggy, his movements quick and impatient. He was shorter than Catherine remembered, and softer around the middle. Success in whatever business he'd moved on to had been kind to his wallet, but not to his physique. "Catherine, you look." His eyes took in her obvious pregnancy, and his expression shifted from annoyance to something harder to read. "You look well." "I am well." Catherine's hand found Ezra's, drawing strength from his steady presence. "This is my husband, Ezra McKinnon." "Husband?" James's voice cracked like a whip. "What do you mean, husband?" "I mean we were married yesterday," Catherine said, holding up her left hand so the gold band caught the sunlight. "In the church in town, with the whole community as witnesses." James stared at the ring as if it were a snake about to strike. "You can't be married. You're carrying my child." "I'm carrying a child," Catherine corrected. "There's a difference." "The hell there is." James stepped forward, his face flushing red. "That baby is mine by blood, and you're mine by right. I don't care what kind of backwoods ceremony you went through, it doesn't mean anything." "It means everything," Ezra spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Catherine is my wife. This is my ranch. You're trespassing." James turned his attention to Ezra, looking him up and down like he was evaluating livestock. "And you are?" "The man who's going to ask you to leave if you can't be civil to my wife." "Your wife?" James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you know what she is? Do you know what kind of woman you've tied yourself to?" "I know exactly what kind of woman I married," Ezra replied. "The kind who works harder than most men I know. The kind who stands up to bullies. The kind who deserves better than whatever you came here to offer." James's face got redder. "I came here to do the right thing. To marry her and give that baby my name. To make an honest woman out of her." "She's already an honest woman," Catherine said, finding her voice again. "And I don't want your marriage, James. I don't want your name. I don't want anything from you except for you to go away and leave us alone." "Us?" James's eyes narrowed. "There is no us, Catherine. There's you, and there's my child, and there's me. This cowboy is just a complication that can be dealt with." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Catherine felt Ezra tense beside her, but his voice remained calm. "I think you misunderstand the situation, Mr. Morton. Catherine and I are legally married. The child she's carrying will be born legitimate. With my name, you have no claim here." "I have every claim." James pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "I have a contract." Catherine's blood turned to ice. "What contract?" "The one your father signed before he died. The marriage contract between his daughter and me, witnessed and notarized." James's smile was cruel. "You see, Catherine, you were promised to me long before you even knew it. Your father owed me money, a lot of money, and this was how he planned to pay it back." Catherine stared at the paper in James's hand, her mind reeling. "My father never mentioned any contract." "Your father was a gambling man, Catherine. He got in deep with some very serious people, and I was the only one willing to bail him out. In exchange, he promised me his daughter's hand in marriage." James's voice was smug. "Of course, he died before he could tell you about our arrangement, but that doesn't make it any less binding." "That's impossible," Ezra said. "A father can't sign away his daughter's future like property." "Can't he?" "In most states, a father absolutely can arrange his daughter's marriage, especially when significant debts are involved." James waved the paper like a flag of victory. "I have every legal right to claim Catherine as my wife, and any children she might bear." Catherine felt the world spinning around her. Was it possible? Could her father really have promised her to James without telling her? She remembered the gambling, the late nights when he'd come home smelling of whiskey and despair. She remembered the debts, the creditors who came to the door. "Let me see that paper," Ezra said, stepping forward. James held it back. "I don't think so. This is between Catherine and me. Anything that concerns my wife concerns me." "She's not your wife," James exploded. "She's mine. She's been mine since her father signed this contract 5 years ago." "I don't care what that paper says," Catherine said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I won't honor any agreement I didn't make myself. I won't be traded like a horse or a piece of land." "You don't have a choice," James said coldly. "The law is on my side." "Then we'll see what the law really says," Ezra replied. "There's a territorial judge coming through town next week. We'll let him decide whether a dead man's gambling debt can override a living woman's choice." James's confidence flickered for the first time. "You can't fight this, Catherine. I have money, lawyers, connections. You have nothing." "She has me," Ezra said simply. "She has this community. She has people who care about her and will stand up for what's right. And what's right is for a child to be raised by its real father," James shot back. "Not some stranger who thinks he can play house with another man's woman. The child's real father," Catherine said, her voice ringing clear across the yard, "is the man who will love it and raise it and protect it, not the man who ran away when things got difficult." James's face twisted with rage. "You think this is over? You think you can just dismiss me like some unwanted suitor? I'll be back, Catherine. With lawyers and legal papers and whatever else it takes. That baby is mine, and one way or another, I'm going to claim what belongs to me." He climbed back into his buggy, jerking the reins so hard the horse tossed its head in protest. "1 week, Catherine. 1 week to come to your senses. After that, I stop being nice about this." As James drove away in a cloud of dust and anger, Catherine sagged against Ezra's side. The confrontation was over, but the threat remained. "Do you think that contract is real?" she asked. "I don't know," Ezra admitted. "But even if it is, there has to be a way to fight it. A woman's not property, no matter what some old paper says." Catherine looked out over the ranch, her home now, the place where she'd found love and acceptance and a future for her child. She'd fought too hard to get here to give up now. "Then we fight," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes, we fight." But even as she spoke the brave words, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that James Morton hadn't shown them his strongest card yet. And when he did, everything they'd built together might come crashing down.